Good. All right. Thank you. All right, folks. Very, very sorry. We had a video issue where we recorded about 2 hours of incredible audio, which we're going to post at the end of this little segment here, but we're going to address a few things before you get to hear that amazing 2 hours of audio. Again, this is Carl. I'm Noah. Carl and I, we're just going to tell you, we got linked up through a charity event. Carl, do you want to talk about how you do MFL and how you met me?
So the Missouri Fight League has been operating around here since 1999, and the owner has been Rob Hewlett. And not too long ago, he got linked up with Rudy Bears here right around where we're at, and they're just really pushing the MFL into some new areas, and we're really trying to expand on the digital side of, the social media side of the fighting, and just trying to help promote the fighters and everything. And I'd say, like, within the last 8 events, we've been slowly evolving our setup and getting more into live streaming and having an actual video archive and getting more social media presence. And so last year we did the first fight for pediatric cancer with Mizzou. And so this year I actually got to be part of that and do the live streaming for it. And that's where I linked up with you guys, kind of through Rudy and through the MMA network up here. And you guys do the podcast and are very interested in doing the commentary. You guys did such a great job at the event. And
Thank you.
Looking really forward to doing this next Bartender's Brawl. So last year was the first time I also came up here just right across the road and did the Bartender's Brawl here at the Incline on 9th. And I think we've got 2 of those scheduled for this year, April and maybe one later, I'm not exactly sure. And we're also going to be doing our next MFL fight over here at Power and Light. And so that's really exciting because it's just, more eyes on the league, more potential clicks, and helping to promote the fighters. And so, yeah, realistically, we got together for that charity event and kind of got our first rep together as a little team. You guys just did such a great job with commentary, and it lets me kind of focus more on just the camera angles and just the time clock and making sure all the little bits and pieces of the live stream are working well. And I just can't wait for this next event coming up. I think it's April 26th up here in Kansas City.
Yes, Bartender's Brawl, April 26th at the Incline.
Yeah. And so now it's still...
Okay, we're on the split though. All right, good deal.
Okay, well, as with every project, as we evolve our setup and as we get just, more technical, we run across complications, and we got to sometimes just work with what we, have available to us in the moment. And so even if this just comes out on audio or whatever, that's totally fine. And I just love being part of the process. It's no big deal whatsoever. And I know that we'll be able to just expand on it moving forward.
Yes. Carl, thanks for coming up here. We apologize for the technical issues on your end as well as the people watching. Carl is a veteran who's done 2 tours in Iraq. So we talked a lot about that over the course of the 2 hours. And I say this, but I really mean it. This was one of the most incredible conversations I've ever been a part of. I can't wait to do it again, and we'll see what we can do with the video. But at least as to follow is at least about 2 hours of incredible audio and discourse from us.
Right, and you'll notice that we come up onto a break, and then that's just kind of where it leads off. But I'll tell you what, we have so much more to talk about next time we come on here. There's the psychedelic movement, there's more stuff with technology that I like to talk about, and just really the sky's the limit. So, it's definitely not the end of the story, but just a nice, beginning, first rep in this process.
I can't wait for the next one. Carl, thank you so much, man. You're the best.
It's been great.
All right. All good? Sweet. Carl, welcome, sir.
Hello.
Thank you for driving an hour and a half to get here. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
A ton of stuff I want to talk to you about today, especially your military experience and some of your lobbying for some psilocybin and psychedelic experiences. But I was curious, did you grow up in Columbia?
So I grew up in what I like to call mid-Missouri, basically between Fayette, Missouri and Higbee, Missouri, close to a no population sign town called Bunker Hill, on a couple 100 acres worth of a farm. I went to Fayette K through 12, and then basically after the military, did 5 years in Mexico, Missouri, where my family kind of migrated to while I was in the military, and then moved to Colombia basically when I had met my wife, and she wanted to, remain living in Colombia. She was doing her residency and fellowship there at Mizzou, and so I moved to Colombia, and that's where I've been ever since, about a decade now. And I really like it.
My mom used to always threaten to send me to the Mexico Military Academy whenever I'd mess up in school.
It's a great place. I actually did some coaching there. I did a little bit of like calisthenics coaching there through a guy that I knew. I was coaching CrossFit in Mexico while I was there, and was meeting a lot of people. I was also working for a local birding distribution company, family owned there in Mexico. Shout out Goldcrest and the Tollner family. But I was doing that as a full-time job, and then I was coaching CrossFit 5 a.m. to like 7:15, and then I was also bartending at what's now the Oaks Country Club there. And that was a fun, action-packed 5 years of my little, what I call my time of reassimilation, between the military life and my current family man parenting role. But the Mexico Military Academy is real cool, and now actually my kids go there over the summer to do like a horseback riding camp thing that they have, and it's pretty cool. They like comb them and saddle them up and ride them around and stuff. And I really like Mexico, Missouri. It's got a chill rural vibe, but there's actually a decent amount of money in that town, and it's relatively progressive, and I don't know, it's just a cool mix. So
I'm from Quincy, Illinois.
Okay, the Croc Center.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My cousin works out there a lot. That's like the YMCA out there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got a big church in it and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, my cousin's a sicko. He's always out there posting videos. But we would head out east, so I would always see the signs for Mexico, Missouri, and I think we'd always stop in Columbia. What is it, Kingsville, that has the rubber band gun shop? Or
Kingdom City.
Kingdom City. Yeah.
I
I always wanted to get a rubber band gun. I never got one. I thought I'd go back when I was old enough. In the saltwater taffy.
Yeah. It's a nice little touristy kind of a hub right there around the the 54 and I-70 interchange. Yeah. So you got Kingdom City, you got Vaz, and then you got Mexico, and yeah, that's a great place. It's just a lot of natural beauty, and Mexico is just that old school brick. It used to be called Brick City before the brick plant closed down, and it was awesome. Yeah, I really liked that. That was where I bought my first house, and I actually bought one of those downtown brick buildings, and I was renovating it, and I sold those right as I was moving to Columbia, and it was just a good experience overall. The weird thing about the military is you develop a pretty hardcore work ethic if you're doing it right, but you're being told what to do all the time. And so when you come back in the civilian world, the thing that you really have to wrestle with is how to keep that work ethic up when you're creating your own schedule, because it's easy to just stay busy doing the wrong things. So a lot of times that's how guys get in trouble. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to work for other people, and I'm going to help, develop other people's dreams for a while, and just kind of try to balance myself out. And that was really good for me. So,
did you play sports in high school?
Little bit. I did Taekwondo, and I really got into that. I did some team sports, but I was never really into it. Fayette wasn't really a big sports, like they were more into their band, and they're like, what do you call it? Like the
orchestra?
That, but also like the marching band stuff and like the flags and all. I mean, they just, the sports wasn't a big primary thing, and they didn't have wrestling or anything like that. So I was really mostly into the Taekwondo. And then, growing up on the farm, we were doing a lot of work. I was doing the hay over the summers and just, carrying a lot of buckets and things like that. And I was driving tractors and vehicles and stuff way before 16. Basically, as soon as I could see between there's like the steering wheel, and I was looking through the top part of the steering wheel, barely over the through the windshield. As soon as I could touch the pedals, I was off. And the thing I really learned how to drive first was a 7-speed 2-reverse tractor, open cab. So yeah, it was definitely not a typical upbringing the way I was brought up, but now I cherish it.
Yeah, I'm sure you draw a lot of not similarities, but like benefits from growing up like that maybe you weren't able to initially.
Yeah, I talk all the time to younger people, like say for example at the Jiu Jitsu, you get some white belts coming in, and I talk a lot about pre-internet humans. Like before everybody had a camera in their pocket and before everybody was connected to the internet all the time, pre-social media, things were very different, very different. And I was raised kind of even in a more old school environment because my great grandparents were actually a big part of my upbringing. And so I was hearing about, the Great Depression and, food and all this abundance and everything's not going to be around forever. Like, I don't know. I just had a lot of those different old school kind of things going on for me. And so just seeing the way that the world's progressed now, I still try to incorporate some of those lessons in with my kids and try to like almost force an extra level of structure and like try to figure out a way for them to like have to suffer a little bit or like have to not get exactly what they want all the time while still maintaining, this new type of parenting model where no physical, no spankings, no let them cry it out, none of that stuff. Like it was really hands-on, really loving and all that. But at the same time, I don't want to fall into that weird trap. I'm sure everybody's heard the meme of like hard men create good times and then good times create soft men and then soft men create hard times and, like it repeats or whatever. And I just, can't be a part of that nonsense. So
I have to kind of laugh just because you're so into the digital world now and you're so up to date on the AIs. We were rapping about it a little bit on Saturday, so it's just kind of funny that you still have a bit of a disdain for it, but you're smart enough. You're a smart enough guy to know for what you're doing now that you have to be in that world somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I see it is I really front loaded my survival portion of my training. Like I can, camp and start fires and live off the land. And I maintain a garden and just all those type of things. Like I definitely appreciate the analog world, but it almost kind of spurs from my like military, what you might call like my PTSD zone, where I feel obligated to stay on the front line of battle to the best of my abilities. And I tell people all the time, you don't understand it, but we don't know how the future is going to define the time that we're living in now. And say, for example, like when they were in World War I, they were not calling it World War I. They were just living it. All that is defined decades later. And there's a good chance that they're going to say that World War III actually started in 2001, or 2008 or 2012. Like we don't have a way of exactly knowing how it's going to be told later. And there's this thing called 5th generational warfare, which is in the military what they call hearts and minds, but it's like the battlefield, the human terrain battlefield of opinions and of trends and memeing and these things like that. And so when I was in the military up until 2009, I was very focused on the kinetic front line. Like I actually did frontline combat. Like I was weapons free for 3 months in Slaughter City. And, I did route clearance in Iraq for 2 tours, 26 months total. And I just felt like that when I came back to the civilian world, the way for me to kind of stay on that front line in the way that I could was in the digital front, like on the internet, and I got just really into what you might call continuing education of just always seeing what this next layer of technology was bringing and the tools that it brings. And I got into crypto early, and I am lucky that my stepfather actually was at the time when my stepfather and my mom married, he was a partner in like a law firm that also does taxes. So he's like a financial lawyer, and I want to say like 2011, broke away from his partnership and actually started his own firm. There was like, drama around what was going on there, and he broke off on his own, and I actually became his IT guy and helped him kind of build a new office. And it was a really rewarding experience for me, and he taught me so much about finance and taxes and economics and stuff, right as I was also kind of learning about crypto and what like Web3 was going to bring to the world and all that. And I've kind of been putting that together, and that is a natural environment that had to be created first for AI to be released to the public. And so it's kind of all built on itself over time, and I've just been staying up with it.
When you graduated high school, what did you initially think you were going to do with your life?
Well, I basically had two competing tracks, but after 9/11, I always thought like, okay, the military would be cool, but at the time, pre 9/11 and like, even 2001, 2002, I didn't like the idea of going into the military and just training all the time and sitting on my hands and living on a post and doing the things that I was hearing people were doing. And at the time, it's like, oh, you have to be the best of the best of the best and kind of get lucky and everything just to see any kind of combat. And so there was a while there where I was kind of kicking around the idea of going to DeVry University in Kansas City. There were people up here that we were actually, so I had some friends that were big into gaming. I've been big into video gaming since I was like 16. And there were some older brothers of some of the guys that I was gaming with that had come to DeVry University, and they were living up here and going to DeVry University. And so we would come up every once in a while and do a big giant LAN party at their place. And they were like, oh, you guys should go to DeVry. And like a bunch of those guys did go to DeVry, and I was going to do like communications and just kind of, be kind of techie, but I battled with that because of course, I grew up very analog, and at the same time, I really wanted to stay physical in my life and do like physical things. And I was kind of gaining some weight a little bit when I was getting into gaming and stuff. And I just thought to myself, like, how are you going to do all this tech stuff and still stay like dangerous and still like be like pushing yourself? And I don't know, I've never really been big into money or like chasing money and stuff. And all these guys are like, oh, we're going to make all this money and it's all about money. And when 9/11 happened, like, it really was exciting to me. I hate to say it, but like, I thought to myself, like, there's no way that war is going to be quick in and out. Everybody's like, oh, it's going to be over soon. And they tried to say like, oh, it lasted 2 weeks and blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know. But at the same time, I didn't know how long it was going to last. And so I went to MEPS, and I was also applying to DeVry all at the same time. I went to MEPS and I did my, initial like intake and all that. And I basically could have done whatever I wanted. And I was asking like, where's the front line at? Like, how do you just get to the fight? And that was route clearance. They had just switched the 12 Bravo, which is the engineer class, the engineer infantry kind of a crossover. The 12 Bravo did a lot of building. It was like construction, but they also did some like mine clearing. They were using like the Bangalore torpedoes and stuff. It was kind of so right as I was getting into that process, they were switching it from 12 Bravo to 21 Bravo and 21 Charlie. And the Charlies were the bridge builders, the road construction type people. And the 21 Bravos was a full-blown combat job class. It was just IEDs. It was this new term at the time, improvised explosive devices, and you're basically just driving around these, different type of vehicles. They had their own type of vehicle. Everybody was still in Humvees at the time. And the route clearance soldiers were getting these new vehicles that weren't even defined at the time, and it was exciting because I thought to myself, okay, if I try to go into anything more specialized and I train for like several more years before I even do a tour, maybe I will miss it. And I would have, actually, because really the tip of the spear of the surge was like 2008. And so I decided to go into route clearance, and I basically joined the National Guard, because in the regular Army, as soon as you're done with basic training, you can end up getting slotted anywhere, and you don't have a lot of control. But in the Guard, you have absolute control as long as you stay busy, because there's this roster, and they don't voluntold. There's this term called, you got voluntold what to do. Like you're volunteering, but like not really. That only happens if you're at the bottom of the roster and you basically haven't done enough, and so you build up these points, and then if you get to the bottom, they can force you to do things. But so I actually went to basic and AIT out of the 110th Alpha Company out of Macon, Missouri, but then at the same exact time was volunteering to go to Iraq with the 110th Charlie Company out of Lexington. So I came back from basic training in AIT and immediately switched units to the Charlie Company out of Lexington. Never drilled with them or anything. Went to Iraq with them, came back, and immediately transferred to 1138th Engineers out of Farmington, Missouri, and went to Iraq with them. And then I was getting ready I tried to come back again and transfer to 1140th out of Frederickstown, Missouri, something close to that, and tried to go to Afghanistan with them. But didn't end up getting that slot, and there's just a long story behind all that. But that was what kind of pushed me into civilian life again at that point in 2009.
So how old were you during 9/11?
I want to say I was a sophomore in high school. So
okay, so your first deployment was 2003 to 4 or 4 to 6?
It would have been technically 5 and 6, because I did basic and AIT 2004 winter, and so I came back and immediately turned around and went to Iraq. But there was like 2 months or something between when I actually got back and when I actually left. And then there was like several months of training. So I don't actually think I hit Kuwait until like June of 2005, and then stayed through until like July of 2006.
Did you find that there was a lot of guys with your intentions who went through the National Guard route? Or do you feel like that's a niche that only you picked up on?
No. In Missouri, there's a lot. So every single state has a totally different National Guard. And, of course I'm biased, but the Missouri National Guard is high level, and there's a lot of different ways that you could go about making that argument. But there's also a deep connection between the Guard in Missouri and the Army Corps of Engineers because of Fort Leonard Wood. And so we had all kinds of guys joining the Missouri National Guard just to go to Iraq on the terms that they wanted to go on. We had guys that were Desert Shield, Desert Storm guys that had been out for a decade. We had guys that were coming in from the Navy, coming in from regular Army. Like, it was definitely not just me at all. And it was my recruiter, Sergeant Pounds, that had basically explained that, he helped me out in that way, because my initial intention was to join the regular Army, but I talked to as many recruiters as I could. And when, he explained to me these details, like when you're in the regular Army, and I watched it happen because we all did it together in basic, because you go through basic with regular Army guys when you're in the Guard, and you write down like, they had to write down like, what would be your top 3 duty stations that you'd like to attend. And then out of those top 3, they try to get you to one of them, but you might not even go to one of your own top 3, right? And in the Guard, it's like, number one, you're not doing anything without the governor signing off on it, And then in Missouri, there's so much pressure for people that are wanting to do these things that it can even be competitive just to get on the combat tour that you want to get on. And at first, luckily for me, in 2005, it wasn't quite as hard, but by 2009, when I was trying to go to Afghanistan, it was so competitive that one little thing on your record, or one little issue that you might have or whatever, automatically there's just so much pressure. It was so easy to fill those slots that like it was a real competition to even get on there. And yeah, no, there was a lot of high level guys in my unit, and those are where a lot of my major role models were coming from, because I was still, pretty much just a big kid when I was 18, 19 years old.
So you're going to go do the route clearing or route clearance. What was the months leading up to when you realized that you had got that job? How quickly did that all unfold to where you knew that you were going to be deployed to, you said IEDs were in their infancy, correct?
Oh, yeah.
So what was that experience like to know I'm going to be dealing with something that's brand new, and how much time did you have?
I had the intention to go to Iraq immediately, even before basic training. And I was already, knowing that the 110th Charlie Company was going to be deploying and everything. And I felt pretty dang confident that I was going to get that slot. And really, an interesting way to answer that question is that the training that they were putting the first 21 Bravos through was all stuff from, what would you call it, like Vietnam. Like we're low crawling and using a mine poker to like find mines in the ground and like learn how to diffuse all these like really old mines. And I don't know, it was stuff that did not actually correlate to what we did in Iraq. And then when I got out, basically between the time that I got back from AIT and the time that I was to show up for, deployment, I was trying to stay working out, and I was trying to do my push-ups and running and stuff, because I wanted to get good PT scores or whatever. But at the same time, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of like uncertainty, and there's a lot of secrecy, because we were told that we were not even allowed to tell people what we were going to do. We were telling people that we were a road construction crew. And even at the send-off ceremony, we went to a stadium over here that I drove past on the way here, as like all of our families came. It was like the last time everybody saw each other, and they were, the battalion commanders getting up there, and it was like, these guys are going to go, rebuild bridges and da 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 da. And I'm knowing that that's not the case, and so that was kind of an interesting experience. And I immediately, just the whole time in the military, it gave me a really good look at the difference between what we're seeing on TV and what the media is telling the general population versus what I absolutely know is going on. It's such a bifurcation. But so then I basically get to deployment, and we go to Fort Riley, Kansas, and learn how to tie a bunch of knots and work on radios and all this stuff. And we're driving around Humvees that have been like modded with basically plywood. And it's like, we've got these plywood turrets on the top of Humvees, and these like crank turrets that don't even turn very much, and like, fake guns and stuff. And we're running these missions that didn't seem super realistic. It was not training that was actually tested on the battlefield yet. It was just kind of like theoretical stuff. And so then we went to Fort Irwin, California after Kansas, and that was pretty good training. They had guys that were coming back, and from the like very first route clearance deployments and stuff, and they set up pyrotechnics, and there was like special forces guys there that were on their off cycle that were like playing as our enemies or whatever, and we were doing some really cool training there. That was actually really good. But it was really just a lot of uncertainty and just a lot of like just trying to maintain openness. And I was partying as much as I could. I was, just experimenting with stuff. Realistically, I thought to myself, like, I don't know what chances I even have of coming back. Like, I was thinking, I'm going to get injured or whatever, and I don't know. That's a lot. It was a lot to deal with. It was, stimulation overload or whatever. But at the same time, it gave me a lot of experience to look back on, and it's helped me, a lot more in hindsight than it did at the time. But once we got there, the mission tempo was so high that I didn't really have any time to think about anything. Once I got in there, we were just go, go, go all the time. It was just, you're either on call or you're on mission, and there's 2 missions every 3 days, and then you're on call on top of that. And It was just a lot of, there were these phases where you'd find a bomb, you'd just be finding bombs all the time. Like you'd just be finding bombs, and the evolution of how they were building the bombs just kept changing. It was always something different. You know, they'd go from command lines to pressure sensitive IEDs with secondaries of like a timer to like walkie-talkie activated stuff to cell phone activated stuff to like IR sensors, kind of like a garage door opener. And then they'd have a garage door opener or a pressure sensitive component to it as well. And it just kept, we'd get better at stopping one thing and then they'd move to the next thing. And it was just.
When you were in Fort Riley, was that a common consensus that everybody knew that training wasn't realistic, or was that something you kind of picked up? I'm sure several people did. And do you feel like they were giving it their best effort, or were there some people there who were on off season, I think you called it, who knew that it wasn't realistic? Or how did you come to that conclusion at that time?
They were telling us that the nature of the battle's changing so fast that this isn't necessarily practically what you're going to experience over there. But the crucial part that we were training on there was triage, how to handle overwhelming situations. And that was the important part. Was every time we would train, or we would do like a mock mission or whatever, they would set it up to where everything was going wrong. Somebody would get hit by a sniper, somebody's down, the bomb blows up. Oh, there was this other bomb that we didn't know about, and now you got 5 casualties, and like, oh, you're having to drag guys. And they put us in situations where, okay, even though it didn't one-to-one translate to what we were doing, what we learned was team cohesiveness, like good communication. We learned how to use the radios, which is really important. And we got a taste of just mass casualty events, like how to do 9-line reports, which is when you call in the medevac helicopters. And just, we, like, almost everybody died almost every training mission, or like we would lose 50%, like every training mission, and then you're all back alive again, And so the thing that it helped was, and we weren't getting as good a sleep, we weren't eating as good, the conditions of where we were sleeping and stuff like that was all just low. And so once we got over there, it was almost felt like we were getting taken better care of, and it was almost a little easier in some respects because, 90% of the missions didn't really have anything go wrong. We weren't getting ambushed all the time. It was kind of rare. You'd find an IED, but like you would cordon it off and you'd, either secure it and get EOD to just take it back with them, or you would blow it on site. And it was actually a lot less chaotic in the actual wartime scenarios than what they had put us through in training. And so I'd say that was the most important part of Fort Riley, was just getting a taste of what it would be like in the worst case scenario that never really actually happened in combat.
If everything went wrong.
They made sure everything went wrong every time.
Yeah. That's a pretty common thing with training, though. I think that there's always some crazy example of something that doesn't end up, never happens in real life. But so when you got over there the first time to Iraq, what was that experience like? From the minute you landed, you went to Qatar, you said first?
Well, sorry, Kuwait.
Kuwait.
I did go to Qatar at one point. Actually, my first tour for like a week. But we got to Kuwait, and when the plane opened up and you walked outside, it was literally like you had opened an oven and you're like pulling a pizza out of an oven. But it was just the rest of the whole time. It was just so hot. There's like fine, gritty sand in the air. Everything's dirty all the time. And like, it was a dry heat. It was the first time I'd really experienced anything like that. And we were taken really, really good care of in Iraq. Like, we had people doing our laundry. We had people cooking all the food, everything was scheduled for us. Everything was nice and tight and close. And I don't know, we were really put in a situation where we had a singular focus. All we had to do was just our mission. And it was interesting. I had never really experienced anything like that. And I kind of sometimes talk about it like we were like the 1990s Bulls, like everybody, it was like eyes on us. You have one singular focus in life. You don't got to think about nothing else, and you're just on mission, but that's all you do. And that's your whole life, and that's all you think about. And it was the first time in my life where I really wasn't scattered, like I was just constantly absorbed in the mission and our guys, and the routine was just the same all the time, and got to know the vehicles really well, and all the weapons really well, and everything was just right there at our fingertips. And we basically could ask for almost anything within reason, and we would have it. And that was pretty cool. And we were always testing new stuff. We were driving new vehicles. It's like, hey, we've got 3 of these vehicles. Do you guys like them? And if we didn't like them, we'd never see them again. And then, if we did like them, then we would get more of them. And, I don't know, there's stuff like pin flares. We got pin flares. We were testing all different kinds of like, tracers and 203 rounds. And I don't know, it was just, I felt like my opinion mattered. And we were constantly helping. They always had these ride-alongs. We would get ride-alongs that would come on our missions with us, and they were constantly asking us questions to try to help develop the training programs for the next. And so I was actually part of, we helped develop what's called Task Force Iron Claw Academy, which was like the first real training for what to do in the case of an IED for, like, let's say 88 mics, which is like a truck driver. Like, let's say you're on, they've got MSRs and ASRs, main supply routes and alternate supply routes. And that's where all the goods and the food and all these materials and stuff are coming in to support, the mission, to support the Army. And we weren't directly protecting those convoys per se. We were going up and down the road and reacting to IEDs and stuff, but we came upon this understanding that every single unit, when we got there, were all developing their own TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures for how to deal with IEDs. And so we kind of helped consolidate that to where every unit that was in our AO would, all of a sudden, they were all doing the same thing. They were all calling the same, what we called sheriff's net at the time, but like there's these radio stations that are actually held together by C-130s in the air, and you can talk to an airplane that's really far away because it's line of sight, but maybe you can't talk to your own TOC, which is a tactical operations center, because you're too far away from it, but they can relay messages in the air.
Okay.
And so we developed basically this system where it became a lot easier and a lot more standardized for convoys to communicate with route clearance. And that helped a lot. And yeah, I mean, being a really low rank in the military and feeling like that I had that much pull, and like I would have ideas, and then all of a sudden they were being deployed, across, everywhere that I was seeing was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure that's an incredible feeling, because not a lot of people get that support in their day-to-day jobs. So when you first landed, how long until, and do you remember your first mission, and like specifically like the feeling and the adrenaline of this is it, this is what we've been training for? What was the first scenario that you got placed in that really, it was almost like a disassociative type experience?
So there's this thing called hot swapping, and that's what happens when a new unit comes in, because the old unit is there and they're running missions. And then so when you come in, all of a sudden your entire unit just doesn't start going out on missions alone with just your guys. There's this period of time where the old unit slowly starts to send less guys out, and then your unit starts to send more guys out. And it's a mix where you'll have, maybe you'll be in a vehicle, but it's all the other guys, or you'll be like two of you and, maybe your platoon sergeant or your squad leader will be in a truck with some of the guys from that had already been doing it. And they are kind of teaching us, what they're seeing, and like we'll have our pre-mission briefings, we always used to we'd show up like an hour and a half before the actual mission was ready to take off, and we would do this briefing where they would show us all the significant activities reports in the area over the last 3 days. It was 72 hours, 48 hours, and 24 hours. And it was like color coded, and you'd see like, okay, well, it's obviously moving this way, or, you know, you could really get a sense of like where the enemy was just by the activities reports. And I probably learned more just in that hot swapping period of time than in any of the trainings, as far as like practical application of what I'm getting ready to actually be doing. And almost every Joe will tell you the same thing as far as you're answering your question, is the very first time that you're getting ready to go on mission, you go to, you know, and you get in your vehicles and everything, and you hook the guns up, and you test the radios and everything, and you load the guns up, and you don't actually load them up fully. You know, you still you can't have like a bullet in the chamber on the base. But so what happens is you drive outside the wire, and there's these like berms, these like fire test spots right outside where you will load the weapon up fully and shoot a couple rounds through each gun to make sure that, you know, it's working. And when you're in a vehicle, even if you're not the gunner, because I wasn't like the gunner, I think I was driving the very first mission that I went on. But even just filling that gun, shooting to that berm, and now I'm driving out into a 7 million population area, you know, of Baghdad, where like a decent percentage of those people would prefer if this thing wasn't happening. Right. You know, it's like they might not all hate you, but like there's some people out there that are looking to, you know, for you to have a bad day. And so, yeah, a lot of anxiety, a lot of just, you know, thoughts of like unknown unknowns, just creative, like what could go wrong, what's going to go wrong, like, and, you know, you're just on pins and needles. But the guys that you're hot swapping with, they're ready to get out of there, and they're kind of already like over it. And it's kind of a helpful process, because I'll be really tripping on some little thing or whatever, like, oh, what do we do about this and that? And they're like, you know, whatever. Like, that's not a big deal, you know. And to me, they seemed borderline suicidal in certain situations. They were just like having no care about things that to me would seem like something that we would need to really care about. And so I really very early on realized, like, you know, you got to chill out, you know, and focus on what I can control. And what we knew we could control was learning the roads. Like, you have to get this perfect memory of like where every little pile of dirt is, because we cleared out most of like the signs on the side of the road and the trash on the side of the road and the foliage, and like in America, when you're going over a bridge or whatever, you know, there's like those aluminum rails that kind of would stop a car from going off the side, and there'd be like a 10-foot drop off, but like you can't, because there's like this aluminum. We tore all that off. That was even before I got there. It was all torn off. So, because you could put an IED behind anything. And so the roads were pretty clear, and you just have to memorize all of it. You have to know, because then, you know, you'll tell like one little dirt pile will be it'll be different. Or like there'll be one spot in the road where there's like a pothole where there wasn't. Or there'll be like what looks like a fixed pothole. It's like ain't nobody out here fixing potholes. Right. It's like, why is that covered up like that? And so we got to investigate those things. Or there'll be like a dead animal on the side of the road, and it'll be like bloated up. And it's like, is that bloated up, or is there something inside there? And so, I don't know. It was really just a lot of getting a sense of the things that I had to just not worry about, or like not take into too much of consideration, and the things that I did have control over. And like, they really pressured us into trying as much as we could to care about as many of the civilians around as possible. Like, these people are not your enemy. Like, most of these people are just trying to live their life, you know, and we really had to care about hearts and minds. So we would have candy, we would have like soccer balls and stuff, and we'd be like passing stuff out and throwing water bottles to people and stuff as much as we could, and trying to like build our reputation up at the same time that we were also, you know, doing our job. And I don't know. It was a needle to thread. You know, it was interesting, but it didn't take very long before that mindset from those people in the hot swap kind of took over, and all of a sudden you're just like, you know, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And it got pretty easy pretty fast. And I was also lucky that it kind of comes in waves. Like the action it'll be really hot and heavy for a while, and then it'll feel like a ceasefire, or it'll be an actual ceasefire. There'll be like an actual ceasefire, and you'll go on a bunch of missions where literally nothing happens. And when you think about all the time that you spend on mission and like setting up and cooling down, like after the missions and stuff, like the actual work that's involved, 99% of what you end up doing is chill. There's only just a very small percentage of the time that you're actually in some sort of intense situation. And so you've just to keep your nervous system from like just totally overloading, or, you know, the physical effects of all that stress can really mess some people up. And I watched some guys like deteriorating, you know, and I just realized, like, I don't know, like what the Christians call like give it to Jesus. Like you have to just compartmentalize your emotions and just realize that you're here. This is what you signed up for this. This is what you want. And you just have to kind of not care about even, you know, you have to be more focused on protecting the guys around you than yourself. I think that's probably the shortest way to say it, is that once you get in this zone where you're watching everybody else's back and you know they're watching your back, and so you're actually not concerned with yourself, you're concerned with everybody else, that's when you get in your flow state, and that's when you can really do your best job.
How long were you in Iraq the first time?
Both 13 months, both times.
And during that 13-month period, how many convoys do you think you escorted, or how many route clearance missions did you do during the 13 months?
I would say something close to 100.
And you say like 90% of those go okay. Mm-hmm. Were there any moments where like a lot of people's or your coworkers' true colors really came out, where they realized they had to go home? Like, how did they deal with the situation where you did end up in something extremely volatile and maybe somebody broke in that moment? How would they handle those situations?
So no matter how much they tell you what you're getting ready to get into, some people just don't get it until it actually happens. And coming from this like safe American first world experience where everybody's got air conditioning and grocery stores and just all the stuff that we have here, and a lot of people just can't even come close to imagining what the actual experience of war is like. And I noticed that a lot of the guys that were the most hard charging, the most like caring about the academics of getting ready, and just the ones that really were trying to have their uniforms polished and everything looking good, and they really cared about the image and all this stuff, some of those guys were the ones that would fall apart over there. And some of the guys that were just kind of go with the flow, like trying to just, you know, stay, you know, cool about everything, and just kind of not really do the bare minimum, but not trying to go overboard and exceed expectations, but just get the mission done and be done with it and move on to the next thing, were the ones that really then sharpened up quicker in the actual, you know, moment of extreme situations. And okay, so there's this thing called a conscientious objector in the military, and it's something I think that came around right toward the end of World War II. And so what you can do is you can actually go to like whatever the military version of HR is, I don't even know, but you can go in and you can basically fill out some paperwork that you are, I don't even know what the right terminology would be, but you're basically admitting, or you're classifying yourself as a conscientious objector. And basically that means that you have determined that you're not capable of, like, let's say, for example, killing the enemy or something like that. And so when somebody puts themselves in that process, that's basically tapping out of being on mission. And we had some guys that, for one reason or another, decided to take that route after, we had some missions that didn't go perfect. And they would very rarely actually go home or get taken completely out of the unit. What would happen is that they would get assigned a job on base, what we called fob taxes, where they would go and they would actually, their job would turn into going and picking up some like local like Iraqis at the gate and watching them as they would go like change trash out of trash cans, or cleaning bathrooms, or like working at the on base, what we called haji shops, or like the bazaars or whatever. They'd sell bootleg DVDs and like hookahs and stuff like that, or carpets or whatever. There was all these little jobs, or like a famous one is like you sit at the front of the chow hall every time the chow is like 4 times a day. There's these big chow halls and there's 2 soldiers at the entry of every single chow hall, and their whole job is to just click a little clicker every time that somebody comes through. They're counting heads as they come into the chow hall. And like we had guys that their whole job was to like keep deep freezes full of bags of ice, and like clean magazines, and like pull the springs apart and stuff, and just like do like little stuff like that. And so it turned into, there was just a group of guys that ended up doing all those little tasks and stuff to help us stay sharp, And so, you kind of end up appreciating those guys. We had a guy that basically all he did was the ice, and would go get us to go meals from the chow hall. Cause like a lot of times we'd be leaving and there wouldn't be really enough time for us to like rush to the chow hall and eat and come back. And so they'd just go and pick up like 25 to go meals, and sometimes would even like write down what we wanted and then go get it or whatever and bring it to us. And so, yeah, there was a few people that had like family issues, like severe situations that for one thing or another that would happen at home that would draw them away. But that was, I can't even really remember those specifics, but there was a couple guys that got pulled away for family issues. But for the most part, it became this thing where most of the guys couldn't possibly imagine leaving the rest of us to do the mission without them. Like you wouldn't even want to take a day off, because the platoon had a few more guys than what even needed to be on any given mission. So there would, almost every mission there would be some guys still hanging out back at the base, and you kind of cycle through to give everybody a little extra break of who stayed behind. And some guys didn't take any of those, and some guys were like totally ready to be back home playing some video games or whatever. And so, I mean, it really just depended on the tempo that you were ready to be part of, during those times. But I think we had more conscious objector type activity my second tour, because there was a lot more combat my second tour than my first tour.
Okay, so in the first tour, if you don't mind, is there anything you can share before we go into how different the second one was? Was there anything that, obviously you did it again, but was there anything that was incredibly scary that happened the first time that was like a wake-up call for you?
Oh, yeah, we had, there's all kinds of situations. We had situations where like one of our other platoons would be, there was this one time where like we were maybe 30 minutes into our mission, and the second platoon was like an hour from being done with their mission, because there's just a little bit of overlap between, because there's always one of us out pretty much. And they got ambushed and had sniper fire and IEDs going off and stuff, and it was like, I'm gonna say like 20 miles away. And we normally,
from the base,
well, from where we were at the time when we got the call, but we drive usually at like 10 miles an hour looking for bombs.
Okay.
And so we decided to drive as fast as we could down to that spot over uncleared territory to try to make it to them to support. And so here I am driving the front truck of the front vehicle, driving 60 miles an hour in a giant vehicle that cannot turn going that fast. Basically just on the hope that we're not going to hit an IED on that rush down there to try to like support them. And that's nerve wracking. We had a situation where we came upon a giant wreck. There was like a special forces unit that had been driving blackout going like 60 miles an hour, and they hadn't done their, like, what would you call it, like their research on the road. Like they didn't realize that there was this one bridge that was out southbound. It was like out, and you had to like go around these HESCO barriers, and they just blasted these concrete barriers and just like sent 3 of their like up armored van things down into this like ravine, and it was just a pile of people and vehicles. And we come up on that and we don't know what's going on. There's people running around, and like there's
you have no idea if they got hit.
We didn't know if we didn't even know what was going on. We come up and make contact with them, and it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's no contact here. This is a wreck. And we had to like help them call 9 lines and get the medevacs in and all that. And yeah, that was an interesting one. We started finding these shape charges where it was like the evolution of IEDs got to the point where they were building these things that turned into what's called an EFP, but at the time it was just a shape charge. And we started getting some research. They started feeding us research about what these things were, and all of a sudden the realization changed from there is no bomb that can even take us out. Because like at first, like it's just these, like it's either homemade explosive, or it's like an old 155 round, which is like a howitzer round from Desert Storm that they pulled out of the ground and rewired it up with like a blasting cap and turned it into an IED. Like there's all these weird makeshift IEDs that we were finding. And even if you were like, just if it's right there under your vehicle and you're like interrogating it and it blows up, yeah, you're gonna be rocked, but like you're gonna be fine. These shape charges, it's like a cone, and it's like a steel cone. And what it does is it encourages all the blast power to go in one direction. And if you're in that like blast cone from a shape charge, you're done. Like even if it doesn't obliterate the vehicle and just like shred you immediately, the force from that concussive blast, if you're inside the cone, is just gonna completely scramble you. And so that was the point where it went from feeling pretty invincible to feeling pretty vulnerable. And they started getting better at hiding them, and then they started breaking out like the curb of the roads, and then creating a mock foam painted curb with a shape charge up in it to where it looked just like the road.
Oh, wow.
And like all there might be is like a little black hole of that IR laser that you might see, or like you might see a command line going across the road that's like that's a pressure, what we call it Christmas tree lights, because it's like a cord. It looks, just think about Christmas tree lights, but every little light is like a cardboard circle with a wire on the top and the bottom, to where if that gets crushed, then those wires touch and that completes the circuit, and then that's the pressure that will set it off. And so that was actually probably the number one pivot of both tours, but definitely the first tour, where I really went from like, okay, I'm going to be fine. Like it went from like not knowing if I was going to be fine or not to like the first many months of the tour, like, just thinking that we were so far ahead in every way that this is doable, back to thinking, okay, like there's a threat out there now. Like that's a real big deal. And so those shape charges, it changed the game, and we had to really tighten up and just really change the way that we were even cordoning off. You can't even drive in front of those things, and you have to determine, like, is it a shape charge? Where is that cone at? Like, we started using more robots, like the Talon robot. You send the robot up, and somebody's driving the robot from inside the vehicle, and you got to like inspect it. And a lot of the interrogation started taking a lot longer. Yeah. Because you just had to, and I watched one of the buffaloes. There's this thing called a buffalo, and it doesn't have a gun. It's fully like acoustically, like it's it's like a giant 6-wheeled vehicle where like each wheel is as tall as one of us, and you have to climb a ladder to get up in it. It looks like a big houseboat, but it's like huge steel, and it's got a hydraulic arm, like a 3-jointed hydraulic arm on it. And it's just for IED interrogation. And it's like basically every route clearance team had a Buffalo. And that was like the vehicle that would actually eventually go up to the IED and like use that claw. It's got cameras and stuff. And I watched one of those things get hit one time, and it was like an underground, what they call a deep buried IED. It was like, I don't even know how many hundreds of pounds of explosives. It was just a bunch of 155 shells just stacked on top of each other, buried. And it was just this is right outside the gate, pretty much, right outside of Stryker off of Biop in Baghdad. It was like checkpoint 24, and the Buffalo is just going up to this totally normal interrogation, and all of a sudden, boom, it blows up, and it's just a giant cloud. And the cloud goes away, and the Buffalo is in a crater, right? Vehicle tires totally destroyed. Don't even know if everybody's okay. Like, there's this moment where you're like, oh, this is it. And I don't know. That one changed a lot of people's perspective of like what's possible. Like, they were really evolving, and luckily everybody was fine in that vehicle. And except for obviously they were like, their bell had gotten rung tremendously, but no, there was no casualties. We actually didn't have any casualties in my platoon the first tour. It was only guys from other platoons that had actually died in my first tour.
Was there any issues with being infiltrated? With, you said you had guys that maybe they stepped back from going on the mission, so they were in charge of security on the base, or, what they call the Haji shops, like making sure those people were legit. Was there any ever issues with infiltration from the locals coming in that you had to deal with close to home?
I think there was always a little bit of that thought, but between OPSEC, like operational security and compartmentalization around who actually gets intel, and the good job they do of licensing the people that are actually allowed to come on base, there was a pretty large percentage of the population that was very happy we were there. And also, of the people that were actually getting jobs, like let's say an Iraqi that was living locally that would come on the base, they were getting paid more than they'd ever seen in their life. And a lot of them really liked us, or at least that they acted like they really liked us. And you don't talk about anything mission critical with those people. You just kind of BS about movies and stuff, and we never had anything happen. We never really had any situation where we feel like that we had given any information away per se. I think some of those guys were probably watching like what vehicles were leaving when, and kind of trying to get some information and playing both sides and stuff. Sure. But like, it didn't ever turn into anything. Yeah.
So when you get back from the first tour, where was your head at politically? Because this is something you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And you go out there and you have this experience and you want to go back. Was that for yourself, or did you feel politically at the time that this was what we needed to be doing as the United States?
A lot of guys super, super patriotic. A lot of guys really were in that zone of like, the world can't function without us. And, a lot of conservative mindset on the tour. And all my biggest role models that I look back on and appreciate these days were very conservative guys. Personally, the way I was raised and stuff was very distrustful of the government, very small government, libertarian type family, and very conspiratorial mindset of like, they're lying to us about everything, and it's all just a big show. And so it was cognitively dissident, you could say, for sure. I would say it was very much a quest for personal experience, personal life experience. I wasn't in a position where I felt like that we were really going to change anything per se. And it became evident. I mean, it became evident immediately that like the cultural difference between the people that we were helping over there and the government and the structure of Islam and just this and that and the other about the Middle East. The idea of like spreading democracy around the world and stuff is a psyop. That's not even the right target, even if, I mean, regardless of anything, you got to meet people where they are and you got to let people live the life. Like freedom is a weird thing because you can't force people into what you consider freedom. Like democracy just doesn't work everywhere. And not only that, but like the planet Earth, we have a full, like between the lowest tech humans and the highest tech humans, we have a 10,000 year gap on this planet. Like we've got still nomadic tribes in the Amazon. And a lot of those people in Iraq and the Middle East are still living the life that was being lived during the times of Jesus. And I never really got the sense that we were permanently changing anything for the better over there. We were just playing shell games to make it more feasible for the American way of life to continue, you know? And I've been ever since I got my hands on the internet, like I had a 56K modem out on the farm that was getting like a 24/4 connection over the phone, you know, back when I was in like middle school or whatever. And gaming leads you to the dark alleys of the internet and seeing a lot of the stuff that normally people aren't seeing, you know. And the deep web of the internet is 10 years ahead of the mainstream news in a lot of regard. And even from, you know, early 2002, even when I was still in high school, I was seeing word on the internet like, oh, people questioning exactly what happened with 9/11 and noticing that, you know, the day before 9/11 that they had gotten on TV and told us that, you know, the Pentagon couldn't tell you where $2.5 trillion went, and just I could go down and just list all these things. And so I was coming into it with a little bit of a skeptical mindset, but at the same time having respect for the game of how to stay dominant and keep the American way of life, you know, safe for our people and what that takes. Because leading hundreds of millions of people is messy, and you can't be completely honest about everything, because the entire point of the military is to keep that bubble active, like to keep people feeling safe and secure enough to focus on their life instead of having to worry about all of the uncertainty that actually exists. And so I never really got like to the point where I was like anti-government or like really against the system per se, because I had respect for what it takes to keep things running in America. And a lot of the guys, even the conservative guys, were like, look, we're living this life and we're seeing these things so that these other people can live their life without the stress of knowing what's actually going on. And so I developed this understanding that there has to be classified information. We have to keep a lot of stuff from the people so that they're not losing their minds. And look at, for example, the Epstein files. Now that we're finally trying to push the real conversation onto the American people, it makes everybody crazy. It makes everybody, you know, have a hard time going to their job and understanding even what is the point of working this 9 to 5, and what is the point of paying these taxes, and what is the point of even doing all these things. And so I don't know. Yeah, it helped me mature as an adult, and it helped me understand the mindset of and the framing of and where the different political ideologies are coming from. But I've always wanted to be able to understand truly where both sides are. and be able to argue the points for all the sides of the arguments in a way that they would tell me that I was explaining it right. Like, you know how like if somebody on the right tries to explain the point of view of somebody on the left, they're going to do it in like a sarcastic, demeaning kind of way, and vice versa.
Vice versa.
And I can explain something from the left or the right on literally every single topic in a way that that person would say, that's how I see it. And I've always wanted to be able to do that. And so, I mean, me personally, politically, I just thought it was all a big show. I just thought it was all just a big, like, scripted, real life drama. Like it's like, what do they call those type of TV shows that are real world, like Survivor or whatever? It's like I can't remember. I can't think of the type of a TV show that is, but it's like reality TV show. It's like a big reality TV show, And so that was, I mean, that's really it. I just had skepticism for everything that was going on, but I understood that it was important at the same time. And I wasn't like really disillusioned by it. But if I thought to myself, the reason I went back is because I thought to myself, if I'm going to be able to see these things, it was almost kind of like a Trojan horse kind of deal. Like if I was going to see the truth of what was going on, I had to put myself in those positions, and I don't know. I still to this day want to be behind the curtain rather than in front of it. You know what I mean? Like I want to be like in Wizard of Oz. Like I want to be next to the guy that's, cranking, what was that old guy? And like, oh, don't look behind the curtain or whatever. Like I want to be on that side where I'm seeing the actual, how the sausage is made, and I can handle it. And it gives me more resources to be able to live my actual life that way. And I'm comfortable with the honesty of it,
So do you feel like, and not to put an ego on you, but do you feel like there's an unearned sense that the general public has for thinking they deserve to see what's behind the curtain? Because it's kind of a little bit of what I'm gaining from you, or what I'm implying from you, is that, and I feel the same way, and I feel the same way about, I won't go like too far into it, but like the Charlie thing, I know they fucked up the investigation, but I also, just at its core, I understand where they're telling you that you don't deserve to know everything that the FBI knows. Now, I'm not saying that the FBI didn't botch the whole investigation and do a horrible job. They probably did. It seems like that's the case. But a lot of people have disdain for that because they feel like the FBI needs to share with them every piece of evidence. Am I catching on to anything there? Like, because you went and you put your life on the line, and you should have access, in my opinion, to more information than some Joe Schmo.
First of all, it's a great question. It's a very insightful question. And I would say it's not unearned. I would love it if the people could have all the information and be able to get to a mature place with it. But the problem is, without the real world experience, without actually having any real skin in the game, even though they think they do, the problem is that they will get the information that they have, or they'll think that they've got some real deep information and just take it in the wrong way. It's like out of context. It's like even when they get the truth, they twist it out of context to fit like their preconceived notions. The general public is not good at science. They're not good at critical thinking. And what I mean by science is like first principles thinking. Like nobody actually wants to be proven wrong, even when they're doing deep research. Like the problem with what you're saying, where do I feel like the general public deserves that information? They absolutely should deserve it. And I would love for them to be able to handle it correctly. But what I've seen is that does not work out in practical reality. And so it's kind of a duality where I would like actually for it to just be forced on them in a way. Like I feel like we're getting too far from reality to the point where that's why nothing makes sense anymore. And so it's one of these things where, like, now where we are with technology and society and just where we are in the world, it's almost like we just had to pull that Band-Aid off, I feel like, and just whoever's going to be able to live with it and get in tune with where the real conversation is just going to have to be the ones that are left, I guess. But at the same time, to give love to the other side of that thought is that there's no way, like, there would be no way for us to just put the entire truth out there, because they wouldn't be able to handle it. And part of that is like the tribalization that's taken place. Like, you know, a fun example is like a Kansas City Chiefs fan can't hear anything good about the Jets or whatever. Does that make sense? Like,
right.
If, you know, once you're a fan of one team, now that's your tribe and you need them to do better than everybody else. And we've got too many people that are hardcore Democrat or hardcore Republican, or, you know, and so what they're going to do is they're going to blank out on every bit of information that doesn't fit their worldview, and they're going to focus deeply on the stuff that does fit their worldview, and they're not going to be able to actually discern an objective reality. They're still going to stay in their bubble, and when all this information, now it's information overload, whereas before, in like the, you know, early 2000s, it was close to impossible to actually get to the real truth unless you were living it. Like, there just wasn't a way. But now with the internet and this like decentralized media landscape that we have, you can get there. Like, you can get pretty close to the truth just by like finding the right resources online and stuff, and getting in the right like signal chats or the Discord or whatever. Like, there's some serious bombs being dropped out there that still aren't mainstream, but like, that's real information. But the problem is like I said, people aren't good at first principles. They're not good at allowing themselves to be disproven. And so if I could just hope for the best, what I would be hoping for is some kind of a mass realization that nobody's right. There is no one group that's on the right side of history. There is no like one group that's got it all figured out. And even furthermore, what I would really love for people to use to help detribalize themselves is to realize that the other side is always going to get voted back into power at some point. And so there is no way to keep giving government more power and authority over all these different aspects of our life. If there's one thing that anywhere from like the, you know, you mentioned the Kirk situation to like the Epstein files and stuff, is that the real way for us to keep our freedom is to keep bringing more personal responsibility into each of our own individual lives and stop trying to give it up to the government. Because we got all these people that think, oh, we could just, you know, create this new policy and we're going to pay more in taxes, but then this good's going to be done in the world. And it's like, no, that just is more fraud. That's just more bloat. It's more bureaucracy. You know, it's more control freak kind of activity. And so, no, they're not ready for it, but like some are. And we just have to stop. I think we're just going to have to stop curating everything for the lowest level people amongst us. We're just going to have to get back to being adults and force maturity on the population. And those that can't handle it are just going to have to be let out of the room.
Yeah, but if the people that can't handle it are the majority, it leaves us in a weird predicament. Because, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, the people that can understand it, process both sides, and handle it, they're going to be the ones that, you know, they're the winners at the end of the day. But when the majority is a tribe of 70 people that will never understand, that can't process it, it leaves you in a rock and a hard place.
Well, that's what I love about the way that we're actually structured as a nation, because we are not a democracy. We are 50 mini democracies. Like, we're a democracy inside of our state, basically. And then we're a republic federally. And so what we really need to do is just focus on the state level rather than, I think, and that's even what's kind of being pushed right now, is we're seeing a lot more news about what's happening in this state and what's happening in that state, like Minnesota and Virginia and California and this stuff, where we're noticing that these policies that sound good on paper don't work in reality. And so hopefully what we can do is notice that what sounds good on paper is not actually what works the best in practice. And it's going to be rough, because you're right. I mean, the vast majority of people, they're too caught up surviving. They're too caught up in their own individual lives. And what they do is they read the headlines without doing the research to find out where that headline is actually twisting the narrative. And I mean, yeah, it's going to be a mess, but I think that there's this wave of technology that's kind of coming right now that's hopefully going to help center everything. Because before, we only had human opinions to look at. We had only leaders. We had whoever's leading our tribe, that's who's like, opinion is the one that we're going to be parroting. But I don't know, like with AI, like there's a new opinion on the battlefield.
But also, you can have all the evidence and information, you can have it black and white, but there's still, again, so many people that are looking for the affirmation or confirmation from the person in charge before they'll even accept that as truth. Mm-hmm. So you can show them every single article, detail, and they'll buy the mainstream narrative no matter what. Yeah. And until it seems like it's just an impossible situation, because until we have a leader it doesn't matter who the leader is. Whatever they go with, there's still going to be a majority of people who buy that narrative no matter what. No matter what they read. It doesn't matter that you can go on X and watch on-the-ground footage of what's going on here, there, or anywhere.
Yeah.
If there's a New York Post article that says it, you're going to have a percentage of people who believe that. And they can see the evidence with their own two eyes that this is what happened, and they just will not believe it until the narrative's adopted by someone that they respect.
Well, at the end of the day, those people, those tribalized people that are more interested in their subjective opinions than the actual objective truth are going to continue dragging us down and keeping the conversation off in la la land, where it's, we're not even getting anything productive done. And the question is that going to drag the whole nation down, or is it just going to drag certain states down? And are we going to be able to, maintain this, first world high trust society during this time of transition? Or, it's basically, how close to reality are we really going to have to drag these people before they wake up? And, like Yuri Bezmenov told us back in the 90s, or it might have been 80s. I don't know when that series of interviews actually happened, but Yuri Bezmenov is a good guy to look up. He said a lot of those people aren't going to wake up until the boot's on their neck. And
right.
If we have to go all the way to the bottom and fight it out, then I think that I'd rather do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I mean, it just, I don't know. It seems like you said, it seems like you said basically, does it affect the state or the nation? It's pretty prevalent right now that it's affecting the nation as a whole. It doesn't matter what state you're in. You're being exposed to radicalism one way or the other.
Yeah. But Missouri's a great place to be in, though. I mean, realistically speaking, as far as states go, we're pretty secure.
Yeah, I guess you're absolutely right. There are definitely better states than other, so that kind of disputes my point. There are some places you can pick a better situation for yourself absolutely by state.
And the demographics are showing it, because the people that are more focused on personal accountability and responsibility, and they want to compete in a meritocracy, they're leaving the places that don't bode well for them. And we just had, like, what was it? Washington is one of them that just passed this like wealth tax, and they thought, it's gonna bring in more money, and now they've already had enough of those people leave the state that now they're gonna have a $23 billion deficit if they keep that up. And it's like, well, how many more times do you have to shoot yourself in the foot before you realize the true human dynamics? I mean, what looks good on paper just doesn't work in reality because of human dynamics. There has to be an incentive structure that actually causes people to make decisions in a way that is going to positively affect the whole. And when you try to force people to do things, it's like I consider the left, unfortunately, to be pretty hardcore control freaks. You know, they don't want to go out and get their hands dirty. They want to tell other people how to spend their money. And it's not like the right is perfect in any way, shape, or form, but I really feel like that it's really the left that needs to come to reality more so than the right, you know?
Well, I don't know when it became a thing where multiple things can't be objectively true. For instance, with the billionaires. I'm willing to concede that I'm sure most billionaires have not ethically made their money. But also, has anybody always made ethical decisions? So can it not be objectively true that there is an issue with billionaires? Like, for one, the big thing I have an issue with is like the real estate market. Like, I hate the fact that these huge companies can make it more difficult for the average American to own a home. That can be objectively true, but it can be also objectively true at the same time that you can't tax these people more money when they're already paying the majority of the taxes. Both those things can be true. Where's the solution? I don't know. I'm not smart enough for that. But you can't get, like what you said, they're just going to dismiss the left and the right's going to dismiss the left and the left's going to dismiss the right. Nobody is ever willing to take two objective truths and start right there.
When it comes to billionaires and rich people, number one, they have the highest mobility. They can go wherever they want. And so you can really chase them not only out of your state, but out of your country, number one. Number two, all these billionaires, they are an international company. They're not even an American. It doesn't have to be American. They can move their headquarters anywhere they want. And so we have to have a system that encourages them to stay here and do their business here in the first place. And the way that we even calculate the richest person in the world or billionaires or whatever is just awkwardly fake, in my opinion, because it would be a way cooler metric if we showed people like the wealthiest people in the world versus the richest people in the world. I don't know if those are the right terms to use, but like we have people that are billionaires that pay themselves $250,000 a year. And we have people that don't own any stake in any company that get paid hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And so there's a liquidity issue. A lot of billionaires, if they were going to be taxed on those billions, what you're doing is you're taxing assets. And the only way, they don't have that liquidity to pay in taxes. So you're forcing them to sell off their businesses. Another thing is they say, oh, billionaires don't pay their fair share or whatever like that. But number one, that is also an incentive structure thing, or like with the real estate market. If you don't want companies buying up residential housing and turning it into Airbnbs and rentals and stuff, then create the incentive structure where there is a better place to invest your money, which is they're doing right now. That's the thing I love about this current administration. People like literally hate this current administration, but they've done more in the first year for our actual economy and the long-term outlook of our economy than any other administration in my lifetime, for sure. And part of that is that they've already changed the incentive structure where you're not going to be seeing these big corporations investing their money in real estate anymore because there are better options out there in the energy market, in the digital assets market. And so it's incentive structures. And then so on top of that, billionaires are only billionaires because they've created giant companies and they've worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week or more to do it. And they have, they've really put themselves out on the line. The risk is massive. And most of those people, most of their peers didn't make it and they bankrupted 4 or 5 times. And even billionaires that do exist have also lost just as many times as they won. And they create a giant amount of tax revenue because every single job under them, every single job they create, they're paying taxes for those people.